May 12, 1945, 7:14 a.m. Flensburg Airfield, northern Germany. Cold morning mist clung to the shattered runway as American soldiers stepped off their jeeps, boots crunching over broken glass and empty shell casings. The war in Europe had ended barely a week earlier, but the air still smelled of burnt rubber and machine oil. Crows perched on twisted hangar beams, watching silently as the Americans moved deeper into the captured Luftwaffe base. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds stopped dead in his tracks. Before him, stretching across the entire length of the airfield, were rows upon rows of abandoned German aircraft. Messerschmitt Bf 109s rested with their canopies cracked open. Focke-Wulf 190s sat in eerie silence, their propellers frozen mid-turn. Toward the far hangar, the metallic shape of something even stranger glinted beneath a tarp. "Holy hell," Private Dawson muttered. "They just left all of this." Reynolds didn't answer. He walked forward slowly, his gloved hands brushing dust off a cockpit frame. The aircraft felt cold, lifeless, like steel skeletons of a defeated beast. Bullet holes dotted fuselages. Tires lay ripped, and smashed ammo crates littered the tarmac. But beneath the destruction, there was something else. Quality. Precision. A level of engineering the Americans weren't prepared to see. A corporal flipped open a cockpit panel on a down Me-109 and whistled. "Sir, look at this wiring. It's cleaner than a brand-new Chevy engine." He held up a circuit bundle so meticulously tied and organized it could have passed inspection in a modern factory. Another soldier called out from behind a bombed-out workshop. "Lieutenant, you ain't gonna believe this. Come look." Reynolds jogged over and froze again. Two mechanics had pulled the tarp off the mysterious aircraft. The morning light revealed sleek silver wings, swept slightly forward, ending in knife-edged tips. Twin-jet intakes gleamed beneath the nose. A strange curved canopy sat perched above the fuselage like an insect's eye. Private Dawson stared with his mouth open. What is that?" Reynolds swallowed hard. "Messerschmitt Me-262, he whispered. "Their jet fighter. The world's first operational jet." One mechanic circled it in disbelief. "Sir, they had this. Ready? Operational." Reynolds nodded once. Slowly, the Americans had fought piston engines. The Germans, secretly, had entered the jet age. The realization hit every soldier on the airfield. If the war had lasted even 6 more months, the skies over Europe might have looked very different. Nearby, another tarp was thrown aside, revealing something even stranger, a rocket plane. A tiny, tailless craft with stubby wings and a pointed nose, sitting like a metallic dart. "What on earth?" Dawson whispered. Reynolds stepped closer, reading the German stenciling on the fuselage. "Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, rocket-powered interceptor." The Americans exchanged glances, shock, then unease, then a haunting understanding. They had won the war, yes, but they were now staring at the future of aerial combat, and discovering Germany had reached it first. Across the runway, soldiers rolled open hangar doors. More planes waited inside. Jets in partial assembly, prototypes with bizarre wing shapes, swept-wing concepts years ahead of U.S. designs. One officer lifted a blueprint off a workbench and gasped. It was a flying wing design, something that looked eerily similar to a future stealth bomber. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These designs look like they're from another decade." Reynolds felt goosebumps rise along his arms. The Luftwaffe had been defeated, but in their workshops, labs, and secret hangars, they had built visions of warfare far beyond 1945. As the Americans walked deeper into the silent maze of abandoned engineering, one thought began to echo through every soldier's mind. What else did the Germans create that the world had never seen? And the answer would soon shock them even more. Because hidden in the final hangar was a project the Luftwaffe never finished. A machine the Allies had only heard whispers about. Something that could have changed the entire war. The final hangar sat at the far edge of the airfield, an enormous steel structure blackened by smoke and half-collapsed from an air raid weeks before surrender. Its rusted doors hung crooked, one bent inward like tinfoil, the other buried in rubble. American soldiers hesitated at the threshold, their boots crunching on shattered glass and burned wood. Lieutenant Reynolds raised a hand. "Flashlights on. Move slow." The men stepped inside. Cold air swept over them. a metallic chill carrying the smell of scorched fuel and machine oil. Dust floated in the flashlight beams like tiny ghosts dancing through the stale, silent darkness. For a moment, it looked empty. Just twisted girders and broken crates. Then Private Dawson's beam froze. "Sir, look." At the back of the hangar, hidden beneath fallen rafters, was a massive shape covered in soot and burlap sheets. Not small like the Mi-163. Not sleek like the Mi-262. Bigger. Wider. Its outline was unmistakably aerodynamic, but not like any plane the Americans had ever seen. Reynolds stepped closer, hands trembling despite himself. "Cut the sheets," he whispered. 2 soldiers climbed onto the structure and pulled the burlap away, dust exploding into the air. The flashlights illuminated cold, dark metal, and a silhouette so alien it looked like it had been pulled from a science fiction magazine. A flying wing. A jet-powered flying wing. Broad. Swept. Seamless. "Dear God," Reynolds breathed. Horton-Ho 229. The rumored jet wing the Allies thought was a myth. A machine decades ahead of its time. One mechanic ran his hand along the smooth, curved leading edge. "Sir, there's almost no fuselage. It's all wing." Another shined his light into the intake. Twin exhaust ports, looks like they could have hit 600 miles an hour. The Americans exchanged stunned glances. Their fastest fighters barely broke 450. Dawson shook his head in disbelief. "We fought prop planes while they were building this?" Reynolds didn't answer. He was staring at the cockpit, embedded inside the wing, smooth, compact, stripped down, futuristic. The sort of thing that belonged in 1960, not 1945. And behind it, the remains of wooden jigs, metal molds, sketches, and engineering notes littered the floor. These weren't ruins. They were blueprints for the future of aviation. One soldier picked up a charred notebook, flipping through pages with trembling fingers. "Sir, you need to see this." Reynolds scanned the sketches. His breath stopped. Swept-wing fighters. Delta-wing interceptors. Jet bombers shaped like daggers. Wing-body fusions. Ramjet concepts. Supersonic wind tunnel data. Germany hadn't just been losing the war. They had been designing the wars of tomorrow. Behind them, a corporal shouted from another corner. "Lieutenant, another one over here." The squad hurried over to find a second aircraft, a prototype fuselage on sawhorses, its aluminum skin half riveted, half exposed. A wooden tail mock-up leaned against the wall. Someone had painted a call sign on the side, P.1101. Dawson whispered, "This one looks adjustable, like they could change the wing angle." Reynolds ran a hand across the blueprint pinned to the wall. "They could," he said quietly. "Variable sweep wings, 20 years before we thought of it." Silence filled the hangar. A heavy, uneasy silence. The Americans had expected to find wreckage. Scraps. Relics. Instead, they had uncovered an aviation revolution that almost happened. A future where jet fighters sliced through the sky at speeds the Allies hadn't dreamed of yet. Reynolds stepped back, feeling the weight of the moment. "Men, what we found here today isn't just evidence of the past." He let out a slow breath. "It's evidence of what we'll be flying someday." But outside, in a fenced-off corner of the airfield, another discovery was waiting. One that didn't involve jets or wings, but something far stranger. Something the Luftwaffe had built underground. Something the Americans didn't even know Germany was capable of. And it was about to rewrite everything they understood about the end of the war. The fenced-off zone lay beyond the ruined airstrip, past a row of shattered fuel tanks and the charred skeleton of an anti-aircraft tower. The grass here grew unevenly, interrupted by mounds of disturbed soil and concrete slabs that didn't match the airbase's original layout. A sign hung crooked on rusted wire. "Betreaten verboten, restricted area." The Americans shared a glance. Anything the Germans tried this hard to hide was worth investigating. Lieutenant Reynolds unlatched the gate. "Stay sharp." This wasn't on any map. The group moved forward cautiously, boots sinking into soft earth. The fog had thinned, but the morning still carried a stale, cold silence, like the ground itself was holding its breath. Ahead, they spotted a square metal hatch partially concealed under weeds and broken timber. Bomb fragments had dented it, but it remained intact. Private Dawson knelt, brushing away dirt. "Sir, this is no storage door. It's reinforced. Look at the hinges." 2 soldiers strained against the handles. The hatch groaned reluctantly before lifting with a deep, metallic cry. A gust of cold air blasted upward from the darkness below, cold enough to make their breath mist. Reynolds shined his flashlight down the shaft. Concrete steps descended into an underground chamber. Thick pipes ran along the walls. Electrical cables hung like black serpents. And at the bottom, a faint metallic glimmer reflected the flashlight beam. He swallowed hard. Let's find out what the Luftwaffe didn't want us to see. They descended into the depths. The air grew colder. Still, unsettlingly clean, preserved. At the bottom of the staircase, they entered a wide, vaulted chamber resembling a bunker mixed with a research lab. The walls were lined with workbenches, tool racks, and rows of filing cabinets with scorched labels. The place hadn't been looted nor destroyed by bombs. It had been abandoned. Suddenly, as if the personnel fled in the final hours of the war, Private Dawson whispered, "Sir, this doesn't feel like an airfield anymore." Reynolds nodded. "Feels like a test site." Then they saw it. A massive circular frame dominated the center of the chamber, 15 feet tall, made of polished steel segments bolted into a perfect ring. At its base sat machinery unlike anything the Americans recognized: turbine housings, pressurized tanks, strange curved ducts, and an array of copper coils wound in a tight spiral. A corporal stepped closer, jaw hanging open. "Is that an engine?" Another shook his head. "No engine looks like that." On a nearby chalkboard, equations sprawled across the surface: fluid dynamics, rotational force, thermal coefficients, all far beyond ordinary fighter design. Beneath them, written in white chalk, were two haunting words: Schildkröte Project, Turtle Project. Reynolds circled the strange machine, running his hand along the cold metal. What were they building? Dawson crouched to examine the underside. His flashlight revealed curved panels, heat-resistant plating, and a spherical cockpit pod lying half-completed beside the ring. "Sir," he whispered, voice trembling, This thing isn't meant to fly like a plane. It's meant to hover." Reynolds' breath caught. Hovering aircraft? Vertical takeoff? Rotary propulsion without blades? In 1945, he examined another blueprint pinned to a drafting table. The diagram showed a saucer-like craft with a central lift turbine and directional vents around the rim. Notes scribbled in German mentioned experimental thrust systems and rotations dynamic. A chill crawled up his spine. These madmen were trying to build a flying disc. A mechanic swore under his breath. "Sir, this is science fiction." Reynolds shook his head slowly. "No, this is what they were working on while their pilots fought and died in piston engines." Across the chamber, another soldier called out, panic rising in his voice. "Lieutenant, this cabinet's full of fuel cells. But not aviation fuel. Something else. Something unstable." The Americans stared at the machine, unfinished, abandoned, but undeniably real. A project cut short by their victory. A leap in technology that could have changed everything. Dawson stepped back, wide-eyed. "Sir, if they had even a few months more." Reynolds finished the sentence for him. This war could have ended in the sky instead of on the ground. But the Americans hadn't discovered the final secret yet. A secret hidden in a separate vault deeper in the bunker. A secret that explained why the Nazis were willing to pour resources into impossible machines, and why the U.S. would soon rush to take these discoveries home. The deeper the Americans moved into the underground complex, the more the air felt wrong. Too cold, too sterile, like a place untouched by time or sunlight. The tunnel sloped downward, the concrete damp beneath their boots. Pipes overhead dripped slowly, each drop echoing like a ticking clock. At the end of the passage sat a reinforced metal door with a cracked red stamp across it. Geheime Luftwaffe Archiv, nicht öffnen. Secret Luftwaffe Archive, do not open. Private Dawson swallowed. "Sir, this feels like the kind of place where secrets go to die." Lieutenant Reynolds stepped forward and tried the handle. Locked. He looked back at his men. "Get the pry bars. We're opening it." They wedged the steel bars into the warped seams, muscles straining as the hinges groaned. Dust rained down. The metal creaked like something waking from a long sleep, then snapped open with a sharp metallic crack. Their flashlights cut through the darkness. Inside the vault sat rows of steel cabinets, stacks of blueprints, and crates sealed with wax. On one wall, dozens of photographs hung on pins, black and white images of aircraft prototypes, wind tunnel experiments, and strange aerodynamic shapes that didn't fit 1940s logic. But one long table at the center of the room drew the eye instantly. It was covered in files stamped Sonderprojekt, Special Projects. And at the very top lay a folder marked in bold black ink. America Bomber Program. America Bomber Program. Reynolds flipped it open. Inside were sketches, real, detailed, terrifying. Flying wings the size of heavy bombers. Long-range jet aircraft with internal bomb bays. Concepts capable of crossing the Atlantic. One blueprint showed a massive jet-powered wing gliding over the Statue of Liberty. The notes beside it calculated fuel loads, altitude, projected flight time. Dawson's voice trembled. "Sir, they were designing planes to hit New York." Reynolds felt his chest tighten. "And Washington, and Chicago, and Boston." Suddenly the flying wings, the jets, the prototypes, they all made chilling sense. The Luftwaffe hadn't been building for the present war. They'd been building for the next. A war where distance meant nothing and speed meant everything. As they combed through more files, the picture grew even clearer. Rocket interceptors with climb rates modern pilots would envy. Jet bombers with swept wings. Test flights recorded at speeds the U.S. Air Force wouldn't match for years. Programs involving pressure suits, high-altitude chambers, experimental fuels. One cabinet door hung open, revealing rows of photographs labeled Hohenflugversuch, high-altitude tests. The images showed German pilots in bulky pressure gear resembling early astronaut suits. Dawson stared. They were trying to reach the edge of space. Reynolds didn't reply. He simply kept turning page after page, the weight of it pressing deeper into his bones. This wasn't a defeated Air Force. This was a technological revolution, unfinished, but unimaginably ambitious. In the back corner of the vault, another box caught his eye. Smaller, heavier, marked with a crimson stamp. Vernichten bei Angriff. Destroy in case of attack. But the Germans never had time. Reynolds pried it open. Inside were canisters of film, reels labeled in spidery handwriting. P.1101 test flug. Horton 6 speed trials. Jetwing fuel mix 003. V-tail prototype number 4 exploded. And one reel, carefully wrapped, marked simply, Zukunft. Future. Reynolds stared at it for a long moment. The vault suddenly felt colder, like the air itself remembered what had been planned here. Dawson finally broke the silence. "Sir, what do we do with all this?" Reynolds closed the box gently. "We take it," he said quietly. "All of it." "Why?" He looked around the vault, at the flying wing designs, the jet bomber concepts, the rocket planes, the hovering disc experiments. "Because the war may be over," Reynolds said softly. "But the race for the future just began." Hours later, as trucks rumbled away from Flensburg loaded with captured aircraft parts, blueprints, and experimental engines, one American soldier looked back at the abandoned airfield. Rows of aircraft sat silent, their shadows stretching long against the tarmac. Ghosts of a war that almost took a very different turn. Ghosts America now intended to learn from.